deal alert. Get £95 off the Google Pixel 2 to the Pixel 2 didn't receive much love in the pre-Christmas sales, but now that we're well into the new year, there's an excellent Pixel 2 deal doing the rounds at the moment, and I must say plenty of deals have been circling the Pixel 2 lately. You can pick up Google's Pixel 2 with 64GB of onboard storage for cheap. Simply head to Carphone Warehouse, and you'll spot that the Pixel 2 is on offer for £559, slightly up on last month's £499 deal. Mind, but dig a little deeper into the contract offers and you can get it a little cheaper. Read next, the best phone deals in the February sale. Simply sort the contract section by lowest cost, and you'll spot the Pixel 2 at £15 per month on a rolling contract on O2, with an upfront cost of £519. Just cancel the contract before the first month ends, and you have a Pixel 2 for just £534. Bargain. Likewise, its plus-sized alternative, the Pixel 2 XL, is also heavily discounted by Google. Pixel 2 now at Carphone Warehouse. My original Google Pixel 2 review continues below. Google Pixel 2 review. Google's inevitable iPhone 8 riposte has arrived. Following the success of the iPhone 7 beating Pixel last year, it was obvious Google would once again attempt to trump Apple's efforts with a barrage of refinements and hardware upgrades. And again, the Pixel 2 is primed to make the same hard-hitting statement this year: there's still a spot for Android in your pocket. Google Pixel 2 review. What you need to know: the Pixel 2 is Google's latest Android flagship. The successor to last year's excellent Pixel handset, this is the smartphone that's primed to set the benchmark for Android phones for the next 12 months. As the smaller of the two new Pixels, the Pixel 2 is a 5" smartphone with an AMOLED screen and a 12-megapixel rear camera that, according to the folks at DxOMark, is the best in its class. And as you'd expect, performance takes a step up too, with the latest Snapdragon 835 processor buddying up with 4GB of RAM and a choice of either 64GB or 128GB of non-expandable storage. Google Pixel 2 review. Price and competition at £629 for the 64GB model and £729 for the 128GB variant. Google's second Pixel branded smartphone doesn't come cheap. However, since it's a smaller 5" phone, there's not quite as much direct competition as you might expect for the Pixel 2. You have the iPhone 8, which has a 4.7" screen and costs £699, the Sony Xperia XZ1 Compact with a 4.6" display for £499, and that's about it for the big manufacturers. It's worth considering the Samsung Galaxy S8 in the same bracket, too. Although the screen is larger at 5.8 inches, it's only fractionally larger than the Google Pixel 2, and it's cheaper as well, at around £500 currently. Image 2 of 9 Google Pixel 2 review. If you're already familiar with last year's effort, 2017's design won't come as much of a surprise. Both the Pixel 2 and its plus-sized sibling keep the divisive two-tone glass and metal rear of the predecessors, although the glass strip at the top is much slimmer than before, occupying roughly an eighth of its behind. Image 9 of 9. You'll still find the circular fingerprint reader on the back, along with a solitary USB Type-C port on the bottom for charging. On the left-hand edge sits both the power button and volume rocker. Are we missing something? Yep, the Pixel 2 doesn't have a 3.5mm headphone jack. A startling move given Google's mockery of Apple last year. You better get familiar with the supplied USB Type-C to 3.5mm adapter, or invest in a decent pair of Bluetooth headphones. At least Google's latest phone has IP67 dust and water resistance, a feature last year's Pixel lacked. There's also Google's Active Edge, with which you can activate Google Assistant without pressing a single button. It's basically the same as the HTC U11's squeezy feature, but with machine learning behind it that can tell a deliberate squeeze from an accidental one. Google Pixel 2 review. Performance and battery life. Despite rumors suggesting otherwise, the Pixel 2 is powered by Qualcomm's latest Snapdragon 835 processor, as opposed to the as-yet unannounced Snapdragon 836 chipset. That's not to say the 835 isn't welcome. Most of 2017's best phones are all powered by it. Image 5 of 9. The processor works in tandem with 4 GB of RAM and a choice of either 64 GB or 128 GB of storage. Like last year, there's no microSD expansion, but you'll find a 2770 mAh battery on the inside, slightly down from last year's 2770 mAh. It's no surprise then, given the more power-efficient internals, that the Pixel 2 is a rapid performer. It's quicker than last year's Pixel, naturally, and at least as quick as most of its rivals. The only phone it lags behind is the Apple iPhone 8 Plus. Here's how the Pixel 2 performed in the Geekbench 4 multi- and single-core CPU tests. Likewise, the Pixel 2's graphics performance is more than good enough to handle anything you can download from Google Play. As you should be able to see from the graph below, it's once again as quick as its rivals and slower than the iPhone 8 Plus. The only outlier is the Galaxy S8, which has more pixels to render per frame than the Pixel and thus is slightly slower in the on-screen native resolution test. Its battery life, that's the most important aspect of performance, though, and here the Pixel 2 is a bit of a mixed bag. In our video rundown battery life test, with the screen calibrated to 170 candelas per square meter brightness and flight mode switched on, the Pixel 2 lasted 14 hours 17 minutes. For reference, that's 4 hours longer than the Sony Xperia XZ Premium, but slightly behind last year's Pixel and a long way short of the Samsung Galaxy S8. But it performed well in real-world use, dipping to just 30% after a snap-happy Sunday at Kew Gardens. Should the Pixel 2 fall flat, though, Google's latest charges quickly. After 30 minutes of charging from zero, battery levels reached 44%, and after just 1 hour and 20 minutes, the Pixel 2 was fully charged. It can't quite match the OnePlus 5's rapidity in this regard, but it's pretty nippy nonetheless. Google Pixel 2 review. Software and feature. Software-wise, not too much has changed from last year's Pixel. It's running stock Android Oreo, which has made an appearance on the original Pixel, but it doesn't include any real, impactful changes. Picture-in-Picture is the major development here, a feature focused on multitasking that lets you keep one app, for example Netflix, in a small floating window while checking your email or anything else you fancy full screen. Image 6 of 9. One of the cooler new features makes cut and paste much easier, through a feature called Smart Text Select. This automatically recognizes items such as phone numbers, place names and addresses, making it easier to select what you need quickly with a single tap. By Google Pixel 2 from Carphone Warehouse. And finally, we have Google Lens, which is all about analyzing live images rather than static ones, interpreting everyday objects like buildings, flowers and signs and providing information on them as you point the camera at them. Just like with Samsung's own Bixby, Lens should recognize what you're pointing your camera at and offer to perform follow-up actions on that information. I say should, because as it stands Lens struggles a bit, identifying London's famous BT Tower as simply a control tower and a bottle of red wine as liqueur. Google Pixel 2 review. Display. Pixel 2 doesn't come equipped with the same edge-to-edge 2K display of the bigger Pixel 2 XL. Instead, we're treated to a regular 5 inches Full HD 1080 by 1920 AMOLED panel with a regular 16:9 aspect ratio, bezels and all. Have a read of my Pixel 2 XL review, though, and you'll find that this is, in fact, a good thing. Image 3 of 9. Unlike the original Pixel, you can choose from either standard or vibrant display profiles in the phone's settings. The former produces more accurate-looking colors, while the latter had a tendency to oversaturate colors, but not by much. Both modes are reasonably color accurate. The standard profile is the better of the two, with our X-Rite color calibrator returning an average delta E of 1.710 is perfect and is a much better display than the 2XL's display with its viewing angle problems. It's reasonably readable in bright sunlight, too. A circular polarizing layer helps to reduce glare while peak brightness reaches 410 candelas per square meter. That's not as bright as the Samsung Galaxy S8 achieves, though, so expect to do some screen shading in really bright conditions. Given this is an AMOLED panel, though, at least contrast is perfect, which means both movies and photos benefit from plenty of pop. Google Pixel 2 review. Camera. Last, but certainly not least, is the camera. Here, we're treated to an almost identical 12-megapixel rear snapper to last year's, but with a wider f1.8 aperture that has both optical and electronic image stabilization for seriously stable shots. Image 2 of 9. Given the wider aperture, the Pixel 2's low-light performance is simply stunning, wrestling away its predecessor's crown in one swift strike. If anything, the colors are slightly less rich than the original's efforts, but it outperforms its predecessor with more neutral and accurate color representation. White balance is slightly off, leaving us with pictures that looked slightly warmer than they should be, but there's a noticeable improvement over last year's Pixel. The original tended to wash over the image with a yellowish tint, but the same ill effect hasn't reappeared. Where the Pixel 2 also impresses is in outdoor shots. In good light, the Pixel 2 produced pictures with superb dynamic range and color saturation, while the white balance was much more accurate. The Pixel really does set a brand new smartphone photography benchmark, distancing itself even further from both its predecessor and Samsung's excellent Galaxy S8. There's also a handful of new shooting features too, including motion photo, which captures a brief section of video to go with your still shots, and a portrait mode, which replicates the blood bokeh background effect you get when shooting with a DSLR. Meanwhile, the same can't be said about its video capabilities. 4K capture is crisp and bursting with detail, but the Pixel 2 suffers from some very odd-looking colors. Across the palette, colors are hyper-saturated, and detail capture is noticeably softer than both the S8 and last year's effort. Google Pixel 2 review verdict. Once again, Google is leading the Android charge. It might be sticking with same uninspired design as last year's, and lacks the bezel-less display of its supersized sibling, but a much-needed processor upgrade and welcome camera improvements have seen the Pixel 2 rocket to the top of our smartphone wish list. The Google Pixel 2 is as good as Android handsets get and arguably as good as any smartphone on the market. You should probably buy one.